Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas, and today I have one of my favorite types of episodes, a career episode, and a particularly interesting career episode because really the focus today is on you, the listener, and interviewing, and especially how to interview as an introvert. So today I have with me Philip Wright. First of all, thank you for joining me today. How's it going?
Thanks, Tony. It's going great. Other than I am in the Midwest and we're experiencing cold snap. Luckily, no pipes frozen, but we're staying warm.
Career conversation today, and uh, should be a really interesting one because Philip is not only an introvert, but an actuary, which is basically, in most cases, an introvert's introvert, right? Like the most introvert people in the business world, basically. I am very passionate about the job searching process. And nowadays it's basically all I do, other than the podcast, right? I'm either helping companies find people or I'm helping people find jobs, all within insurance. And so I've read a lot about kind of the theory of interviewing, and I've helped a lot of people with this process, and I've interviewed a lot of myself. The research is very interesting. The research makes it very clear that interviews are not great ways to identify the right person for a job, and hiring managers tend to overrate, I don't think that's the right word, tend to give too much credit to high energy candidates. Sometimes to the detriment of the actual job, right? So if you're interviewing, if you're the hiring manager and you're interviewing somebody for like a sales role, a relationship management role, a front of the house role, yes, that high energy is probably a good thing to screen for. But if you're interviewing somebody for an actuarial role, for an accounting role, for some desk underwriting roles, for a finance role, the very high energy candidates might actually be a negative for the job, right? It might actually be negatively correlated with their ability to do a job, and yet the research says they're more likely to get the offer. Or like my best friend Andrew Holland puts it, guys like him and I, in interviews, can our mouth can write a check that our behind can't cash. So basically, I am really interested on how to advise introverts when it comes to interviews, because that question comes up all the time. What I've been telling them before this conversation is, number one, read the book Quiet by Susan Cain. In general, not just for interviews, it'll help you come across better without going crazy in the business world. And number two, I've been telling them, double up on your caffeine. Basically, anything that gets you high energy short of cocaine will probably be good for the interview, right? What advice do you have? And am I wrong in let's start there.
Yeah, there's quite a lot in there. Let's unpack it. So clearly, starting off, the stereotype about actuaries exists, which is, how do you tell an extroverted actuary? He looks at your shoes when he's talking instead of his own, right? Fortunately, with technology changes, there's Microsoft Excel. Now we're getting into the advent of AI. We have a lot more advanced tools. Actuaries do need to become a little more comfortable with communicating rather than just being in the back room pushing data through a mainframe, right? But you're right, there's a balance there. I think being able to communicate well as an actuary is in demand, but the exams have a way of kind of filtering out very technical actuaries who are detail oriented and who really engage work. They start to work through fact finding, whereas your witty salesman is likely to just jump right into the conversation, right? And yeah, humans aren't perfect. And I love that you called out that the research shows that interviews aren't always the best way to find candidates. That's absolutely true. Unfortunately, everyone's biased and you can't get around that. And I think people tend to, no matter how much they want, they tend to favor people who they like, correct? So all else being equal, you have somebody who has the same skills, they're going to go with the person that they want to work with, whatever that means. I love the book plugins. I think to really frame this conversation as an introvert, the biggest mistake I see is really around mindfulness and framing everything. So, what I mean by that, a lot of people get the definition of an introvert incorrect. So, a lot of people, when they say they're an introvert, that means they can't talk. That's not what an introvert means. An introvert is how you draw your energy from, right? So that, like me, I'll talk to you, I'll go to the party, but I'm probably going to head home at 8:30, 9 p.m. and go to bed. Whereas extrovert, so I'll actually, it's kind of interesting. My wife is an extroverted introvert, and I'm an extrovert, or sorry, I got the mix up. She's an introverted extrovert. I'm an extroverted introvert. That's super confusing. But what I mean by that is I can talk, but I really like to rest by myself. She likes to be quiet in the corner of a busy restaurant. So I think where a lot of people get stuck is they kind of define themselves as I'm an introvert. I don't like talking. That's not true. What it means is you're just going to burn through all of your energy. Now that's okay. You can practice. It's like a muscle, right? You don't start out doing dumbbells with 50-pound weights. You're going to start out on much lower weight. The same thing for communication. Really, practice is key. You are going to get your energy, your social battery drained, but communication is a skill you can improve on. You know, charisma, while some people are naturally more inclined, it is something you can work on. And most leaders that you talk to have worked on it in some capacity. You know, there's stories of Winston Churchill, who I would argue gave one of the greatest speeches of all time. He used to practice giving speeches and while taking a bath, right? You have to apply that same mentality to your interviews. And so I know it sounds silly, but don't let that label define you, and be open to improving your communication, and that'll allow you to give a good interview. And I second the your comment on the energy is great. I had never noticed that before. I'm naturally a high energy person, so that probably plays into my favor. I like the caffeine suggestion. I actually do that. I drink coffee before an interview, but certainly be engaging. Um, you know, another thing too that we can dive into is, in addition to be engaging in high energy, I don't know if the research shows this, so I'd love to hear your thought. But anecdotally, I find interviews that go in a conversational matter, they tend to go better in my favor versus tell me about a time, you give an answer, tell me about a project, you give those very rigid interviews. They don't really work out. So kind of going back to the practicing the communication skills, one thing you can do, you can almost force the interview to go conversational by, I'll pick an example. And a common question you'll get at the entry level is, tell me about a time a process is broken and what do you do to fix it? Well, insurance has a kind of a stereotype of not always being as tech forward as like a tech company. So you can answer the prompt and then you can end with, has a similar situation in your company happened? Have you had a model that was in Excel when really it should have been in the cloud? They're going to say yes because it's insurance. And that you can ask little questions like that in there, just really quick questions that'll kind of turn it into a conversation.
That's very interesting. So from the sales perspective, in sales theory, get them talking about themselves, right? Normally in sales, how you get taught to do that is check their LinkedIn, see if you have something to connect on, something in common in your backgrounds, and in the traditional walk into their office type of meeting, which less often nowadays, but basically, is there something in their decoration that points in the right direction of what to get them talking about? right? Do they have a sports thing or whatever? But I never thought of it the way like that's a really brilliant way to do it, where because you know the industry, because you can take a good guess as to what kind of problems they have, flip a question around after you answer it, right? Like answer the question, uh, and then show interest in their world. And yes, chances are now they'll talk about their world. And
Absolutely.
and no, number one, you've shown an understanding of what their problems are. And number two, naturally, the more that you get them to talk, the more they're getting to like you.
Yeah.
Very,
So
very. I never
I
thought
want
of it.
to I'm going to throw out a quick caveat though. As an introvert, you do want to be confident, and again, that comes with practice. So make sure on that tip you don't say like, "Does that make sense?" or "Do you get what I don't say something like that." But ask like a targeted, a confident question. So that's just a little caveat though.
But by the way, you mentioned charisma a little bit ago uh, as a skill,
Mhm.
and communications as a skill. Communications, yes, definitely. Join Toastmasters. Anything you can do to improve your communications, fantastic. But on the charisma side, uh, I've never thought of charisma as a skill. So if how do you invest in your charisma? What books, classes, uh, any recommendations for people who?
Yeah, I have to actually Google this book before I give a plug for it, but you've said two things that actually tie in really nicely to kind of a power of being an introvert, which is yes, you have to work on your communication, but you're probably more comfortable reading books, right? And actually, a lot of what I've learned has been from books. So, one thing I really liked when you're talking about sales and kind of maybe like talking about the person, which works great. And you should do that if you're comfortable with it, because again, people are biased and they like to talk about themselves. If you're not comfortable with that, though, there's a really good book, "Negotiating Like Your Life Depends Upon It" by Chris Voss. You can Google Chris Voss and look at it.
He's the
Again,
negotiator, right?
yeah, and he great tip. He does business consulting now, so great tips. So one of those is mirroring, which works well, which is in good faith and being genuine, kind of repeating words that your interviewer says. It works well. So that's a superpower of an introvert is you're more comfortable reading books and you're more thoughtful about it. And you can actually apply those lessons to how you interview. Also, if you're like, sometimes the critique I hear is, I'll read all these books, I won't remember everything. But what I find that happens is the more you read, you'll pick up some little bit of tidbit subconsciously, and you'll find that you apply it. So honestly, the more you read, the better.
100%. And I think that introverts naturally do the reading, like they just like it, right? Uh,
Mhm.
I think where they generally need a push, and we all need a push on this, is put it into practice. Not the whole book, something, right?
Yeah, I
Something,
should
put it into
say
practice.
I should say too, nowadays, YouTube, I honestly transparently do a lot of podcasts. That's great too. YouTube, so I mean, you really don't have an excuse. There's other avenues if you hate reading. Now I wanted to answer your charisma correct question. There's a books, I had to Google it, Cues by Vanessa Van Edwards. It is awesome. She makes the argument that charisma can be thought of as on a spectrum, which is you want to find the perfect balance between warmth and competence. So competence on the y-axis, warmth on the x, or yeah, warmth on the x-axis. Sorry, I need the visual aid here. So you probably everyone has met somebody who's really, really highly competent and not warm at all. So
Mhm.
that I've seen several actuaries throughout my career at various companies like that, right? And that's kind of a stereotype where they're super, super smart, but they can be almost matter of the fact to the point that it comes off as rude. On the other end of the spectrum, you probably know somebody who's kind of been in an entry level role for 30 years. they're super, super nice, nicest person ever, so no one's going to terminate them, but they might have quality errors, their production might not be there, but everyone's probably encountered a person like that through their career, right?
So
You're
they're so nice that they're allowed to stay as part of the furniture.
exactly, but they're maybe at 70% productivity, right? You want that optimal balance. And I think you also need to kind of read the room on where that balance lies. So in a board meeting, you might need to flex that competence a little bit more. You might not be as warm. Whereas if you're training someone or talking to a new employee, you're probably going to need to flex that warmth a little bit more, because if you're like a jerk to them and just showing them how smart you are, they're not going to learn anything that doesn't really do any good for the organization, right? You kind of have to hold their hand a little bit. So definitely situational awareness there's key. But yeah, that's how I think about charisma. That's the argument she makes. And what's really cool and empowering about that, to tie this all together, warmth is something everyone can improve. You can learn digital body language, fake it till you make it. That's a thing. And clearly competence is something everyone can learn, right? Like that comes with time, research, and a little bit of grit. So you can learn charisma.
Interesting. Um, what about the end of the interview and the follow-up to the interview? So the advice that this extrovert gives is close the interview, and by close, what I mean is, at the end, when you get a chance to ask some questions, you should ask a couple of questions that show your understanding of the job in the company. And the last question, the last 45, 90 seconds, whatever, should basically be a, hey, Philip, I was excited when I applied for the job. I am even more excited after the interview, after the 3 interviews, right? Uh, I think that I would be a great fit for this company, this department, and I'm very excited to work for you guys. For an extrovert, that's very easy to say, but basically, same story. We go back to the research that says that hiring managers want people who are excited to work for them, not just people who have the aptitude uh, and don't show excitement for coming to work for you. So what about how do you recommend handling the end of the last few minutes of the interview?
Yeah, I think the telling the interviewer you're excited is excellent advice. I've actually never had a candidate say that, and my mind goes to, that would be pretty cool to see. I think that would automatically set you apart. And yeah, so I've heard a lot of hiring managers, some senior leaders say they look for that. I mean, I've heard it called different things. They look for that it factor. They don't know what it is, they can't really articulate it, but yet they look for it. It's that vibe. And again, there's probably some human bias in there, unfortunately. Um, but at the same time, as an introvert, you can replicate that feeling through what you're doing. Like you said, being high energy, taking interest in the person, showing excitement. One thing, closing the interview, one thing an introvert can do very well is you tend to be more thoughtful. I do find follow-up questions go better when they're not pre-canned. As a hiring manager, I can usually tell when you come up with those um, before versus throughout the interview. And for whatever reason, when they're ever throughout the interview, they can be more thoughtful. Bonus points if you can kind of expose a problem within the company and imply you recognize it and how to fix it. Look, ultimately, your value is your ability to solve problems in some way, right? And so you kind of want to signal that with your follow-up questions, and you certainly want to do that. You also do want to be a little bit selfish and sprinkle in. You do want to reverse interview. That's almost a separate topic. That's probably, I don't know. I'd love your opinion if that really helps you get the job or not. But you almost need to do that for yourself as well.
I
Just
I wouldn't do it on the first interview. So
not with. Well, it depends on who it's with, right?
but my what I tell candidates, so when I'm prepping a candidate to interview with one of my clients, uh what I advise them is, the first interview, you're really selling yourself. uh
Mhm.
and then, if you do get extra interviews, that's where especially towards kind of the second half, uh then yes, start digging into uh the things and sometimes if the interview process is fairly quick, then it's, if it's like a one shot, if I have I have some account manager roles that are fairly entry level, a couple years of insurance experience, they're fairly entry level role. uh, and often it's like a one Zoom interview and you get an offer, or you don't.
Yeah.
So for those types of roles, it might even be okay to ask those hard questions once you have the offer in hand,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, that's a good call out.
Now, if it's a deep interview, if we're talking about an executive level role and you're interviewing 5 times, uh, yeah, by the third or fourth, absolutely feel free to ask those hard questions, and they'll probably be perceived positively too.
Yeah. And some more advice came to mind, that I realized I kind of tend to do. Don't do this sparingly, so probably don't do this throughout the interview. But when it's ask question time, normally the interviewer is kind of like, okay, we're wrapping this up, and kind of when that's a good time to make be careful about this, but very, very tasteful corporate jokes. Honestly, if you make them right, it shows you're smarter.
What's a corporate joke? Define
So
that.
something like, let's say they're talking about a process. Say, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never had Excel crash on me, or just something. You know what I mean? It shows you're not nervous. It comes across as pretty confident, likable. You're intelligent, and that can also kind of make the conversation go a little bit, or the interview go more conversationally. But again, maybe don't do that until you've worked on that skill a little bit, because humor is subjective. So
It's
you want
definitely
to make
an
sure they're
advanced.
very tasteful.
It's definitely an advanced move. Uh, I'm trying to think of my own interview experience. I don't think I ever attempted that. Um,
Oh, can
well,
I give you an example?
yeah.
So if I'm interviewing, the context has to be right. But if I'm doing like an internal interview, it's like a context I've seen, if somebody asks the same question as your current role versus the new role, you can be like, you can call that out playfully and be like, oh, if I mess this up, do I lose like this job and my current job? It's just kind of funny, like, you know
That,
what I
that,
mean?
that,
Something
that's a
like
good
that.
that's a good one. Um, we talked about the closing of the interview, and I mentioned follow up, but I didn't dig into follow up.
Yeah.
Follow up, I think, is very important. And as an introvert, it's very easy to get it right,
Mhm.
because it's just like it. Basically, what I recommend with follow up, as soon as the interview is over, send a quick email, one paragraph. Hi, Philip. Just wanted to thank you for taking the time to interview me today for the Actuary 2 role. And then a little bit about what you enjoyed about the interview. Like just a quick, really enjoyed learning about the plans of the company, really enjoyed learning about the system transformation, really enjoyed learning about your career and, as an actor, really enjoyed learning about why this role is so important for the team. Whatever, something that shows that this is not just a canned message. Uh, and thank you, and send it. Don't make it long. And then, uh, that evening, send the physical thank you letter, the thank you card. Very similar content, but handwritten thank you card. It's super old fashioned, and it's a lot harder to do today in the post-COVID remote era, because often you don't have it. But if you do have it, if that person does work in the office and you do have that address, send it. Uh,
That's what I was gonna ask, is how do you do that in a remote environment?
it's you could, um I was gonna say you could ask for the address, but yeah, it, if it's a remote environment, you're probably not gonna be able to get there. But this is insurance. I guarantee we have plenty of people interviewing with bosses who go into the office 2 or 3 times a week.
Mm,
If that's the case, if this person is interviewing you from their office, uh,
yeah.
even if you're going to be remote, uh, send the thank you letter. Excuse me, the thank you card. It's very similar, very short, 1 paragraph kind of thing. Handwritten thank you cards get noticed. They're so uncommon nowadays that they get remembered.
Mm,
It's quite possible that the decision, whether positive or negative, got made before the card arrived, but guaranteed that the card arriving did not hurt you. It can only help you. So just do it
a,
if
cou-
you have an address.
a couple things that one is insurance is very detail oriented, however, so please triple check and get a friend to triple check the spelling. I know that's meticulous, but you gotta think insurance very detail oriented. You don't want a typo in an insurance contract, right? If you can avoid it, you'd like to avoid a typo in a rate filing to the DOI. So just make sure that would be my one thing is make sure it's ironclad. Nowadays, that's pretty easy. If you're sending an email, it doesn't even have to edit it for you. You can just throw it into ChatGPT and like, hey, do you notice anything unclear, any unspelling? You don't want to have ChatGPT write it for you unless you're really good at using ChatGPT. But all else equal, you probably don't because you want it to come across as human.
We at Good Recruiting we use Grammarly.
Mm,
We actually use the paid. I use the paid version of Grammarly. I don't think that's required by Goodwin, but even the free version of Grammarly is very good. And the reason I I say Grammarly instead of ChatGPT is because you have to write it yourself. It's just making it sound better. It's
yeah,
not generative.
yeah,
I agree that it could be risky to try to outsmart the system by having ChatGPT write the actual content, and then it doesn't sound like it.
yeah, yeah. There's a few people I met who I'd be comfortable like, yeah, you can use it, but you need to be really good at prompting, and I think we need more time for that skill to get nailed down. I did want to address one thing you said, which is I think you called it out, at least from my anecdotal experience. I've never gotten, and maybe it's subconscious, I don't know, but I've never gotten a thank you email and then like, well, I wasn't going to hire him, but now I hired them. However, I can't articulate why, but certainly the best candidates I've ever hired have all sent them. I don't know if it's correlational or causational. Could be biased here, whatever. And as far as the handwritten note, yeah, I think to be honest with you, at first glance, I was gonna say like I don't know about that, like I'm remote, but I did agree with your point that no one's ever done that before. So, I almost would react differently if that happened, and so that could be a way to set you apart. It wouldn't hurt you. Just I agree with you. It wouldn't hurt you unless you say way too much or there's a grammatical error.
Yes, keep it short. Thank you
Yeah.
notes always keep them short and a little detail on, so that it doesn't look like a pre-made form. Uh, the 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 uh, the the thank you email. Uh, yeah, the thank you email doesn't get you the job. It
No.
it it can be a tiebreaker, uh, and it won't hurt you. Like it's not the reason that you got the job. It could be the straw that broke the camel's back and got you there, kind of thing, right? You have nothing to lose by doing it, and it's so easy to especially for the type of people for the type of people that we're addressing today. So easy to get it right, and it doesn't require any extra energy. Also, going way back to kind of the beginning of the talk of the conversation, where you defined introvert and an extrovert. And yes, I was incorrect in that for a long time. It was only the last few years that I really understood the energy thing. I
Mhm.
think that the introverts are shy assumption, right? Um, what I really loved from what you said is it will take energy. Do it, like spend the energy
Mhm.
being more high energy in the interview. Uh, if you're bothering to interview for a job, it's worth needing an app after the interview. That's fine, right?
Yeah.
Spend the energy so that you don't have the disadvantage of being perceived as a low energy candidate.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, I think really framing your mindset around, an it's kind of tacky, like, oh, introvert doesn't define me, but you really have to frame your mind like that. That's the first step to really excelling as an interviewer, right? By the way, something popped in my head that I want to throw out there too. We keep, when we were talking about the email follow-up and something, we keep throwing out like, oh, it might be a tiebreaker, it might not. One thing I want to encourage introvert listeners is this is really hard and it's going to crush some of you, but don't think about it. I'll tell you as a hiring manager, there can be a million different things in the background about like why it took 3 weeks for them to respond or why they selected a candidate. It's really, really difficult to do this, but I promise you, you aren't going to be able to figure it out. There can be Tony, you probably know even better than me. There can be just a million different things that
That
happen.
I had never thought of like of telling people like, don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
But yes, what I tell people is you can't manage the timing of an offer. What you just made me realize is that I should also be telling people there is no correlation between the timing and whether or not you'll get an offer. The timing is completely an internal thing on their side, right? You
Mhm.
might have been the first person they interviewed. You might have been the last person that they interviewed. Uh, Somebody might have gone on vacation, especially if it's late in the year or middle of summer. Uh, right? Don't just keep going with the interview process. Keep going with your job search. Uh, Sometimes people get an offer very quickly. I've seen processes that are incredibly long, and you just can't control it. Don't let it stress you. I would also add. People ask me all the time, uh, how often and how long can I keep following up with for an answer? uh, right, if I feel like I'm being ghosted, so to speak, right? If I interviewed and then I never heard back, uh, what I tell them, and you tell me if you use a different measure, um, what I tell them is you're not hurting yourself if you're checking in every couple of weeks, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
check more often than that.
Mhm.
And yeah, you can like even if it's been 3 months, if you have not heard anything back, and you continue to be polite and not do it more than every couple of weeks, there's no timeline. There's
Yeah.
no.
So I definitely agree on the 2 weeks. Just keep the message brief. Don't give a paragraph.
Mhm.
You don't want to come off as, and again, I don't want to give introvert listeners anxiety, but you don't want to come off as neurotic. Again, unfortunately, the problem with communication, this is hard for introverts to get, is it's the one thing in your life where it's not the effort you put into it, it's what the other party gets out of it. And you can't always control that. So you want to be careful about that.
um I This whole thing really has been about communication. um I'm a huge fan of the disc profile, and I'm a huge fan of manager tools. That's manager-tools.com. They
Mhm.
have a ton of free content to around this profile and how to communicate. And they have what used to be an in-person conference, which is now a 1 day, like 6 hour virtual, you can like $700. I been wanting to do it for years. I haven't done it. One of my best friends did it and loved it. Anyway, if you really want to invest in your communications, that's a good. This profile is empirically based, and manager tools. All their stuff is based on decades of what actually works. And I have found it to be fantastic. It's industry agnostic, but definitely fantastic.
Yeah, I'm familiar with both of those. I will say also as a plug, so I think introverts tend to understand that personality things like DISC are kind of an archetype and a model, and they're not perfect. So I would just encourage introverts to look at it with an open mind. Yes, there's going to be nuances that the DISC isn't going to capture, but it still has value. And if it doesn't vibe for you, that's okay too.
Yep, absolutely. Anything else we haven't yet touched on?
Yeah, I well, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I had something and I completely forgot it.
Don't close the interview that way.
Oh man. Well,
No, no,
I
no, no. For the
I'm
podcast,
gonna have
it's
to
fine.
bring you a
But,
handwritten note
yeah,
in Lawrence.
for the podcast, it's fine. What I'm telling the listeners, don't close your job interview by going like, yeah, I had something, but I don't remember anymore.
Yeah, definitely. Don't follow me. See, and actually that's a great call out. It's okay to make a mistake. Don't dwell on it. Try to I mean you can keep your
That's
company, right?
yes, that's very, very good. Number one, remember the fallacy of transparency. Basically, just because you know you got it wrong, maybe they don't know.
Mhm.
And there's a good chance, right? They're thinking about themselves. There's a good chance they did not notice whatever it was that you got wrong. And number two, they know you're human. Don't absolutely what you said. Don't dwell on it.
Yeah.
If it was a technical and right, if you've got a technical question, let's say you're a developer. This is a more technical interview, right? I don't really recruit developers, but let's say it was a more technical interview, and you realize as you're answering the fourth question that you actually were wrong on question two, and you realized why. Then yeah, that was a technical question. Go back and be like, hey, I just made the connection. This is how I
Yeah.
would have done it.
I will say too, it's important to remember people are biased, and I've seen this a lot on panel interviews. It's messed up, but people are humans, we're not robots. And what you'll find is if somebody likes a candidate in the first 30 seconds to 5 minutes, they'll forgive the same mistake, all else being equal too, right? So that's just the way it is. Let's say there's a candidate, I've seen this on panels, there's a candidate somebody really likes, they make a mistake. They might well, they don't know that, but that's okay. We don't need a perfect candidate. They're awesome. They'll learn. Versus somebody who maybe talks like this throughout the interview, they're going to nitpick that answer probably already, and it wasn't really about the actual answer.
Humans are well documented to be absolutely horrific when it comes to motivated reasoning. So life is not fair, interviews are not fair. Accept the fact that this is not a perfect evaluation of your performance. Do the things that we've talked about so that you start ahead, so that you start with grace. I think it's a great. I think it's a great way to kind of think about it.
Yeah. I will also throw out some hiring managers will do this, and I don't like it, but it's far and few between where they interview somebody and then they're like, oh, they didn't have the technical experience. That personally drives me nuts. But most hiring managers, if you've gotten to the interview stage, they're probably willing to work with you on your qualifications at that
I,
point.
in our industry, and I'm not as familiar with the actuarial side as I am with, say, underwriting claims, etc. In our industry, we have more jobs that require experience than we have people with the experience for the jobs. Okay.
Yeah.
If you got the interview, it's because, I mean, they've seen your resume. They know the experience you have. If you got the interview, you're in the process, right? You're alive. You're not the candidate that they were dreaming of when they posted the role. But take it from a recruiter. We tell this to clients all the time. Uh, there are no purple squirrels. There are no purple squirrels, which is the recruiting term for the perfect candidate that doesn't exist. And if they did exist, you can't afford them. Within insurance, every role, the yes, they would love to hire somebody that has 10 years of experience doing this exact same thing in this exact same system in your world with this exact same set of Excel modules, right? In this exact same type of database for a company just like mine. That's a very low risk hire.
Right.
They're not going to find that person. The person they're going to find is going to be an imperfect fit. Might as well be you. If you got the interview, don't waste time apologizing for being or calling attention to the fact that you don't have the perfect technical experience. Make a case for why you're going to be fantastic for them, even though
Yeah, and ultimately your boss wants to hire somebody that makes their life easier, right? Like your boss is not some overlord that wants to punish candidates. Like when I'm a hiring manager, I have a need of some kind. When I hire this person for that need, and I would really, really like if nothing catches on fire with this need after I hire you, right? Now that may happen, mistakes happen, that's great, but can you show me you're gonna get in and really become a subject matter expert, own the process, take ownership? You know, you being excited kind of indicates to me that you're gonna take ownership. And I like not having to worry about your stuff. And again, it's selfish, right? Hiring managers selfish. We don't want to have to do our job and also your job too. And the more you can communicate that, the more it's a green flag for the interview process.
the yeah, every opening, somebody has pain. That's why there's an opening, right?
Right.
Whether it's the hiring manager themselves or their team is in pain. Help them see how you can take that pain away,
Right.
and they'll do their. In fact, I would really add this. I have definitely seen lots and lots of hiring managers go not at all. They basically come back and tell us this person not at all the background that we expected we would hire for this role, but we love them.
Yeah.
We right. It happens all the time. And
You never know what's going to happen with budgeting. Maybe they had an extra position open. They extended an offer to another candidate, but they were going to hire somebody 6 months from now anyway. They message the VP and it's getting approved, and they can extend an offer to you. You never know, right?
Yep. Yep. Don't overthink the other side.
Yeah.
Philip, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a really fun one.
Awesome.
And I think it'll be a really helpful one. I I let's put it this way. If I have 400 career chats, like the chat with Tony sides, this year, which would be pretty average, I'm probably gonna tell 100 people, hey, go check out this chat. So yes, this is I'm very happy to add this to our podcast catalog, and it's one that I'll be referencing to people often.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I know this is kind of a stereotype, but I'm just giving advice that I would want to give 18-year-old Philip, and it's true.
That's exactly why we started Insurance Nerds. The resource we wish was there when we started in insurance without a roadmap.
Yeah, it would have saved me a lot of bruises.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Tony.